I knew something was wrong the moment my name echoed across the stadium. The applause around me roared like crashing waves, but the row labeled Reeves Family sat untouched, 4 empty seats glowing under the stage lights like a spotlight on my humiliation. No movement, no familiar faces, not even a late arrival pretending to care. I forced myself to keep walking, smiling for strangers, while every step hollowed out my chest a little more. That day was supposed to be a beginning, but for me, it was confirmation my family had already chosen where I belonged, and it wasn't beside them. 8 silent months passed after that ceremony. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Then my $7 million penthouse hit the real estate headlines, and suddenly, my phone lit up with a text from Dad. Family dinner at 6 p.m., important discussion. That was the moment I realized. They finally remembered me. Growing up in the Reeves household meant learning exactly where you stood without anyone ever having to say it out loud. I was Evelyn, the middle child, the filler, the one who didn't need much. At least, that's what they told themselves whenever they chose Madison or Caleb over me. Madison, my older sister, was the golden girl. She didn't earn attention. She absorbed it. Every achievement of hers was treated like a family victory. Every shortcoming was brushed off with, "She's under a lot of pressure." Caleb, the youngest, was the miracle boy constantly rescued from consequences he created himself. Late homework? Mom wrote a note. Car accident? Dad blamed the city's terrible road design. Failure never touched him. They wouldn't let it. And me? I learned to be the quiet space between their noise. I remember being 10 years old when I won a small art competition at school. I rushed home, ribbon in my hand, heart pounding with pride. But Mom didn't even look up from the kitchen counter before saying, "Sweetie, can you take Caleb to his room? He's upset because he didn't get picked for the soccer team." That was the first time I realized my joy came second. Later in high school, I joined the architecture club. Madison joined the business society the same week. Guess which one made the front page photo of the family Christmas card? Guess who didn't even get mentioned? But nothing, not even years of small cuts, prepared me for the sight of those 4 empty seats at graduation. When the announcer said my name, I turned instinctively toward the section where families were cheering and crying and filming their kids' big moment. My row was easy to spot because it was the only one, undisturbed. The seats looked almost staged in their stillness, untouched by celebration, untouched by anyone who belonged to me. I should have expected it, but hope is stubborn. It clings even when it shouldn't. After the ceremony, I sat alone on the stone steps outside the stadium, gown pulled at my feet, holding my diploma like it was supposed to mean something more. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no messages, nothing except a family group chat notification that read, "Congratulations, Evie. We had Caleb's parent meeting today. Hope you understand." One meeting. That was all it took for them to choose again. I walked home alone that night, carrying not just my diploma, but the realization that I could disappear for months, and they probably wouldn't notice. I just didn't know that was exactly what would happen next. The 8 months after graduation felt like living in a quiet vacuum, one where the world moved but no sound ever reached me. My phone stayed painfully still. No calls from Mom checking if I'd eaten. No texts from Dad asking about my plans. Not even a lazy "hey" from Madison or Caleb. It was as if the moment I walked off that stage, I walked out of their world entirely. At first, I told myself it was fine. I didn't need them. I had my degree. I had my ambition. I had the fire they kept insisting I didn't. But silence has a way of echoing, and when it echoes long enough, it starts to feel like truth. My apartment during that time was a 500 square foot shoebox with peeling paint and a window frame that whistled every time the wind touched it. I worked 2 part-time drafting jobs, assisting architects who barely remembered my name. In the evenings, I'd come home with dust in my hair and bruises on my knees from climbing scaffolding, just to learn what textbooks never taught. I called Mom once. Just once. It was late, and I was exhausted mentally more than physically. I had my laptop open with a stack of failed design revisions next to me. I dialed her number because for a moment I wanted to feel like someone had my back. "Mom?" I said when she picked up. "Oh, sweetheart, can we talk later? We're throwing Madison a surprise party. Don't ruin it." Click. I stared at my phone for a full minute. The screen eventually dimmed, but the feeling didn't. I stopped calling after that. Instead, I poured everything into work. job after job, blueprint after blueprint. I learned how to negotiate with contractors twice my age. I learned how to stand toe-to-toe with developers who saw me as a young girl with pretty ideas. I learned how to survive without applause, without validation, without anyone waiting for me at the finish line. And then I found it. The opportunity that would change everything. A half-constructed penthouse on top of a nearly abandoned building downtown. The original developer had gone bankrupt. The bank wanted it gone. Everyone else thought it was a money pit. But when I saw it, I saw potential sunlight pouring through the open frame, skyline views that could command a fortune, and the bones of something extraordinary under layers of dust and neglect. I bought it with everything I had, and with everything I didn't. Nights blurred into mornings. I worked through rain, through winter winds, through migraines so sharp I saw white. I learned where every beam sang and every pipe rattled. I shaped it with my hands, with my breath, with the stubborn belief that someday, this would mean something. And then, one morning, it did. The penthouse sold for $7 million. My name, the one they ignored on graduation day, was suddenly everywhere. Everyone noticed. Everyone congratulated me. Everyone, except my family. Until the day the headlines got too loud for them to pretend I didn't exist. The morning everything changed started like any other me, rushing between emails, invoices, and the lingering smell of coffee burned at the bottom of my cheap coffee maker. I was half focused, half asleep when my phone vibrated. Then vibrated again, then again. By the fifth buzz I frowned. Nobody contacted me this much ever. When I unlocked my phone, the screen exploded with notifications. Congrats on the sale. Saw your name on the news. Is this really your project? Looks amazing. Then came the articles. My name plastered under headlines. Young architect turns abandoned rooftop skeleton into a $7M luxury penthouse. Evelyn Reeves, the new face of modern urban design. For a moment, I just stared. People knew my work. People appreciated it. People, strangers, saw me. And just when I felt something warm, something proud rising in my chest, my phone buzzed again. This time, the notification preview wasn't from a colleague, or a reporter, or a developer. It was from Dad. The first message in 8 months. I swiped it open with a disbelief so sharp it almost hurt. Dad. Family dinner at 6 p.m. Important discussion. That was it. Not, congratulations. Not, I'm proud of you. Not even how have you been. Just a summons. A summons disguised as family. I felt the familiar tightness in my throat, the same one I had felt standing in front of those empty graduation seats. The same feeling of being seen not as a person but as a utility. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, I considered ignoring it, pretending I never got the message, matching their silence with my own. But no. If they wanted to talk, if they wanted something from me, then they would have to face the version of me they chose to abandon. I typed a single word. Okay. Then I set my phone down. My reflection stared back at me from the black screen, older, sharper, steadier than the girl who once waited for her family to clap for her. This time, they weren't summoning the Evelyn who begged to be seen. They were summoning the Evelyn who built a $7 million penthouse from rubble, and I wasn't walking into that house empty-handed. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m., not a minute early, not a minute late. If my family respected anything, it was punctuality. Funny how they valued that more than their own daughter. The Reeves house looked the same as always. Pristine lawn, warm porch light, perfectly trimmed hedges. A picture-perfect family, from the outside. Dad Richard Reeves opened the door before I knocked. He didn't smile, he didn't hug me. He didn't even say my name. Just a stiff nod. Evelyn, come in. 8 months of silence, and that was all he had. I stepped inside. The dining room had been arranged like a corporate negotiation. Centerpiece removed, extra chairs pushed back, documents stacked on a side table. This wasn't dinner, it was a board meeting in disguise. Madison, my sister, sat upright, swirling her wine like she'd learned it in some online etiquette course. She didn't bother hiding the scan her eyes made from my shoes to my face, like she was evaluating if success had really chosen me. Evie, she said cheerfully, tone sugary enough to rot teeth. So glad you could make it. I forced a polite smile. You left me a very compelling invitation. Ah, on the other side, Caleb lounged in his chair, tapping his fingers as if he was bored already. Yo, Ev, he said lazily. Look at you. Big shot architect now, huh? I ignored the jab. Mom Linda leaned forward to touch my arm with an awkward, too light pat. Sweetheart, we've missed you. I'm Zavaz. Missed me? Then why didn't they call? Why didn't they show up? Why was my graduation gown still hanging untouched in my closet? Never complimented, never acknowledged? I didn't voice any of it. Not yet. I took my seat noticeably, the only empty chair, left exactly for me, at the far end of the table. A symbolic distance. A deliberate separation. Dad cleared his throat loudly, a move I recognized from every time he wanted control. Let's get straight to it, he said. Madison nodded as if she'd been waiting for her cue. We've come across an incredible real estate opportunity, she began, sliding a glossy folder onto the table. Prime location, high demand, massive returns. Caleb leaned forward. And considering your recent payday, this could be a chance for you to be part of something bigger. There it was. The real reason they suddenly remembered I existed. Richard clasped his hands together. We need capital. Strong capital. If we secure the land fast, we'll dominate the market. His eyes locked on mine. You can make this happen for all of us. Mom chimed in softly. It would be wonderful to have you finally working with your family. My family. The same family who didn't bother to clap for me on the most important day of my life. I looked around the table, Madison, expectant, Caleb, smug, Mom, rehearsed, Dad, calculating. They weren't offering me a chance. They were assigning me a role, and they had no idea I hadn't come to play it. Because while they were setting the table for a deal, I had brought something entirely different to it. The room hummed with the quiet arrogance I'd grown up with everyone, assuming I would nod, smile, agree, contribute, comply. The perfect middle child, the dependable backup plan. Not tonight. I reached slowly into my bag, fingers brushing against the thick stack of documents I'd spent 4 months fighting for. My pulse was steady, my breathing calm, every movement deliberate. When I pulled the folder out, the table fell silent. Madison paused mid-sip. Caleb stopped tapping. Dad's eyes narrowed. Mom's hand froze halfway toward the breadbasket. I placed the folder on the table. The sound? A firm, sharp thud, cut through the room like a blade. What's that? Caleb asked, eyebrows raised. A contribution, I said, sliding it toward the center. Since we're talking about opportunities, Dad folded his arms. Evelyn, this isn't the time for theatrics. I met his gaze. Then consider this. Practical. I unlatched the metal clip. Gerald, the business partner Dad had invited, the man lurking near the corner, leaned forward. The second he recognized the logo on the first page, his mouth fell slightly open. Is that? He started. Go on, I said. Take a look. Gerald lifted the top page, and color drained from his face. The Grandview commercial block, he whispered. Madison blinked. The what? Dad turned sharply. That property isn't even listed yet. I smiled. A small smile. The kind that comes from finally standing on ground you built yourself. It was, I corrected. 4 months ago. Gerald kept reading, voice barely above a breath. These are acquisition documents. He looked up at me. The entire block is under your name? I nodded. Dead silence. Then, Dad slammed his hand onto the table. Evelyn, do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said calmly. You knew we were pursuing that development, he roared. I did. I flipped another page toward him. And I also knew you didn't think I was capable of anything in real estate, until you saw a headline. Madison leaned forward, voice tight. Evie, seriously? You bought the anchor property for our project? Without telling us? Funny, I said, tilting my head. I don't recall anyone telling me about this project either. Caleb scoffed. Dude, what's your problem? You've got money, why can't you just be happy for once? Happy, a word my family treated like a privilege I hadn't earned. I placed the final document on the table. The approved development rights, signed, sealed, official. You, Dad breathed, staring at the papers. You got the permits too? I attended 17 city meetings, I said. Alone. Showed up early. Stayed late. Negotiated every clause. While you were all too busy with Madison's charity gala and Caleb's weekend tournaments. Dad ran a hand through his hair, furious. This was supposed to be our deal. No, I replied. This was supposed to be your way of using me. Again. Mom finally spoke, voice trembling. Sweetheart, we just wanted you involved. I turned to her. You wanted my name. You wanted my clean credit. You wanted my money. But none of you wanted me. Her eyes filled with tears. Madison swallowed hard. Caleb muttered something under his breath. I gathered the documents into a neat stack. This, I said quietly, is why I came tonight. And, for the first time, they realized the conversation on this table wasn't going to be theirs. It was going to be mine. For a long moment, no one moved. No one blinked. Even the chandelier above us seemed to freeze, as if afraid that the smallest sound would shatter the tension hanging in the air. Then, Dad shot to his feet. Evelyn, he thundered. You think because you got lucky with one penthouse that you know how this business works? I looked up at him, my voice steady. This wasn't luck. He jabbed a finger toward the documents. This property was supposed to be a Reeves project? A family investment, and you blindsided us. Madison flinched at his tone, then quickly regained her composure. Evie, we're not mad, she said, trying to sound reasonable but sounding more desperate. We're surprised. You should have told us. We could have guided you, helped you. Helped me? I repeated, letting out a humorless laugh. Madison, the last time I mentioned real estate, Dad told me it was a field for people who actually understand numbers. Dad stiffened. You were inexperienced. And now? I asked. Still inexperienced? Or does $7 million buy me a little competence in your eyes? His jaw tightened. Caleb rolled his eyes dramatically. Jesus, Evie. Getting defensive much? Nobody's attacking you. We're just saying you should have waited for us. Waited, I echoed. For what? For you to notice me? That's not what we meant, Mom whispered. I turned to her. Her eyes glistened, hands twisting anxiously in her lap. Mom, I said quietly, you had 8 months to call me. 8 months to ask how I was. 8 months to say you missed me. Her lips parted but no words came out. I leaned back in my seat, never breaking eye contact. And Madison, you had 8 months to text me anything other than your Venmo requests. Caleb, you had 8 months to brag to your friends about something other than how Dad always has your back. And Dad, I looked at him, really looked at him. 8 months. You didn't say a word. Dad strode around the table like a caged animal. You want to talk about who didn't say a word? He snapped. You vanished. You shut us out. I shut you out? I pointed to the empty seat beside me. No. I waited. I waited on graduation day. I waited those 8 months. I waited for something, anything that showed I mattered. Caleb scoffed. You're so dramatic. I turned on him sharply. Dramatic? Caleb, the last time you felt ignored because Madison didn't like your Instagram post, Mom took you to dinner and told you that you were the pride of the family. Caleb's face reddened. Shut up, Evie. No, I said, not anymore. Madison slammed her palm on the table. Why can't you just let it go? It was one graduation ceremony. One, I agreed softly. One moment that showed exactly how much I meant to all of you. That is not fair, Madison snapped. You know how chaotic things were? Caleb had exams, Dad had a board meeting, and I had my graduation, I whispered. My once-in-a-lifetime moment. The room fell still. Dad exhaled sharply, leaning forward as if trying to regain control. Enough. What's done is done. The point is, this property you bought belongs in the family portfolio. We're going to purchase it from you, at cost. That's generous. My head tilted slightly. Generous. He nodded stiffly. You want to make things, right? Start by contributing. Contributing, I repeated slowly. That's what this is about. It's about unity, Madison snapped. It's about stability, Dad corrected. It's about the project collapsing without her, Gerald muttered under his breath. I turned to him. What? Gerald finally spoke clearly, voice strained. Your purchase removed the anchor property for the entire development. Without it, we lose investor interest, zoning leverage, and our position in the district's bidding cycle. Dad shot him a warning look. Gerald ignored it. Richard, he said quietly. She didn't just buy a building. She dismantled the project. Everyone froze. Madison turned pale. Caleb sat up straight. Mom covered her mouth. Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous low. You knew this, he growled at me. I did, I said. And I knew exactly what it meant. Madison stood abruptly. eyes wide. You sabotaged us. No. I stood too. I saved myself. You betrayed your own family, she shrieked. I stepped closer to her, voice low, unshaking. My family betrayed me a long time ago. Mom broke into soft sobs. Sweetheart, please, you don't mean that. I turned to her, and my voice softened, but not my resolve. Mom, I ate instant noodles alone on the night of my graduation. Alone. Not because you couldn't come, but because you didn't want to. She cried harder, but I couldn't let myself comfort her, not this time. Dad straightened his suit, trying to salvage control. Evelyn, last chance. Sell us the property. And if I don't? I asked. He looked at me with cold finality. Then you are no longer part of this family. Madison gasped. Mom trembled. Caleb muttered, Jesus, Dad. But my father stared at me like he meant every syllable. I inhaled slowly. Then, I smiled. Richard, I said calmly. I stopped being part of this family the moment you left 4 empty seats at my graduation. His expression cracked just barely. I gathered the documents, clipped them together, and held them at my side. You want the property? I said. Build your own future. I already built mine. I stepped back from the table. You chose silence, I whispered. So now, you can live with it. The room shook with tension. Madison cried. Mom sobbed. Caleb looked stunned. Dad stared at me, face twisted between anger and defeat. I turned away from all of them and walked toward the door. Evelyn, Dad shouted. If you walk out that door. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I already did, I said softly. 8 months ago. And then, I walked out. The night air hit me the second I stepped outside, sharp, biting, almost cleansing. For a moment, I just stood there on the front porch, breathing in the cold like it was the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Maybe it was. Behind me, I could still hear muffled voices. Mom crying, Madison arguing with Dad, Caleb pacing. But none of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. I walked down the driveway, heels clicking against the concrete, each step pulling me farther from the version of myself they'd built, and closer to the one I had built alone. When I slid into my car, the silence was deafening. Not the painful kind. Not the kind that echoed like an accusation. This silence felt earned. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and let myself feel everything at once: anger, sorrow, relief, grief for a family I never actually had, and the faint spark of something else: freedom. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A message from Mom. We're sorry. Please don't give up on us. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen, unsure whether the ache in my chest was forgiveness trying to surface or the last remnants of hope finally dying. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there, the same way they let me sit alone on my graduation day. I put the car in drive and pulled onto the street. As I passed familiar places, pieces of my past flickered like old films. The corner where I waited 2 hours for Dad to pick me up only for him to forget. The cafe where Madison told her friends my architecture dreams were cute. The park where Caleb bragged about how Dad always bailed him out. Every memory felt smaller now, like I had finally outgrown the cage they kept me in. The city became brighter as I approached downtown: neon signs, headlights, glittering skyscrapers. And there, rising above everything else, was the building where my penthouse sat. My work, my risk, my triumph. I parked in the private garage, stepped out of the car, and looked up. That penthouse wasn't just a home, it was proof. Proof that I didn't need their applause to build something extraordinary. Tonight, I walked away from my family. But for the first time ever, I felt like I was walking toward myself. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, just the soft hum of machinery pulling me farther from the house I grew up in and closer to the life I built with my own hands. When the doors slid open, the warm glow from my penthouse spilled into the hallway, welcoming me like nothing in that family home ever did. I stepped inside. The air was clean, still carrying the faint scent of cedar from the custom shelves I installed myself. No shouting, no accusations, no expectations I'd never be able to meet. Just space. Open, quiet. Mine. I placed the folder of documents on the marble island. The overhead lights reflected against the silver clip, illuminating my name, Evelyn Reeves, printed boldly across the ownership page. For the first time that night, I let my shoulders drop. I crossed the room toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Los Angeles stretched out below me in a sparkling sprawl, 1,000 tiny lights flickering like the universe had spilled its stars across the ground. My reflection stared back from the glass, not the Evelyn they forgot on graduation day. Not the Evelyn who waited for their approval like it was oxygen, but a woman who fought for every inch of the world beneath her feet. A woman who chose herself. I laid a hand against the cool glass. Families show up, I whispered to my reflection. And if they don't, then you learn to show up for yourself. Outside, the city pulsed steadily, indifferent to what I'd lost but quietly celebrating what I'd gained. Tonight, I didn't mourn the people who left 4 empty seats at my graduation. Tonight I honored the woman who filled them with her own strength. I turned away from the window, letting the lights fade behind me. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt like clarity. It felt like freedom. It felt like home. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't just walked out on my family tonight. I had walked into my future.